rolling hills of the Austrian countryside and the Red Bull Ring welcome the International GTOpen Championship for rounds 5 and 6 of the 2020 season. It's been a fascinating start to the year. 3 different winners from the first 4 races, and there's a very good chance, I think, that we could get another new winner today. Andy McEwen up here in the commentary box. That is the view that we've got. It's a picture-perfect autumn afternoon here in Austria. The track temperature has been stable in the mid-20s all afternoon long. Not a cloud in the sky. And what a great venue for racing this will be. Qualifying earlier on this morning threw up quite a few surprises, it must be said. There was definitely a slightly different look to the front of the grid maybe than we anticipated, and a couple of drivers having problems in the session as well. It was a session that was affected by 2 red flags. The first for Nicky Luttweiler's Porsche, which stopped on the run up to turn 1 with some sort of mechanical issue. The second, perhaps even more surprising though, was for an off for Stefan Ortelli. It's very rare that we see Stefan Ortelli, veteran driver that he is, making mistakes, but he made one going through turn 6 and beached his Ferrari, the AF Corsa APM Monaco run Ferrari, in the gravel trap at this corner. Actually, the cars are making their way through. There is the number 22 Porsche of Nicky Luttweiler, so they've clearly got, or they hope at least, that they've got to the bottom of whatever the mechanical problems were in qualifying earlier on this morning. Let's hope that that car can stay out of trouble. On board camera here with Nick Moss in the number 72 Optimum Motorsport McLaren that he shares with Joe Osborne, and they have qualified down in 8th place for this first race. The teams each have to nominate a driver to qualify for race 1 and also start race 1, and then the other driver has to qualify for race 2 and they will take over the first stint in race 2. But if you're new to GTOpen, each race does have a mandatory pit stop during which all of the cars have to pit. It is actually allowed for a driver to do the whole race on his own, and that's what Nicky Luttweiler will be doing. He drives that Porsche solo, but everyone else will have a driver change, and they will have one driver getting out, the other driver will jump in then for the second half of the race. And of course that's where the dynamic of the race tends to shift, because we've got not only a mix of different classes of drivers, we've got pro teams, we've got pro-am teams, and then all am teams as well. And of course those different driver combinations are able to do better maybe at certain parts of the race than others. But we also have the handicap system. It's kind of like a version of the success penalty system that we see in other kinds of GT racing, and that handicap system basically applies to teams that finish on the podium in races earlier on in the year. They then have to carry extra time in the pit lane. It's a minimum pit lane time of 70 seconds anyway, and the successful teams from most recent races have to spend even longer in the pit lane, and that's just to try and stop the same people dominating basically. As I said, mix of pro and pro-am teams at the front of the field. We've got 4 all-out pro driver lineups here this weekend. Louis Pret and Vincent Abril in their AF Corsa Ferrari. Also the 24 Writer Engineering KTM Crossbow, which qualified a wonderful 3rd. Stefan Messina and Patrick Niederhauser driving that car. Sally Yoluk and Charlie Eastwood share the number 34 TF Sport Aston Martin Championship contenders, and the 59 car of Miguel Ramos that he shares with Enrique Chavez, who are the championship leaders. They're also a pro outfit. Then you've got about half a dozen pro-ams and 4 all-am lineups all towards the back of the field. And of course the pro-ams are where you tend to see a lot of movement, because if you've got your pro driver in and the rest of them have their am driver in, that's sometimes an opportunity to try and gain some ground. Well, on pole position is a Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren, but not the one that's leading the championship. It is in fact Fran Rueda who put his McLaren 720S GT3 on the pole position by 3.5 tenths in the end, over Louis Pret in the AF Corsa Ferrari. So it's a pair of pro drivers on the front row, but the McLaren is a pro-am car. The Ferrari is an all-pro lineup. And so McLaren and Ferrari on row 1, and then making its debut in the championship is the GT3 specification KTM Crossbow GTX concept, and Stefan Rossina has the honour of taking that car's first ever stint in the series. Patrick Niederhauser will take over at the pit stops. Also making their first appearance of the year in the championship, and therefore not scoring points, but still very much gunning for podiums, are Ram Racing in their Mercedes AMG GT3, a car that will be familiar to British viewers and drivers that will be as well. Sam Dehaan, who drives that car in British GT this year, and Callum McLeod, who drove it last year in British GT, and they've teamed up together on the second row of the grid. Optimum Motorsport's first McLaren on the grid is the number 7 example of Ollie Milroy and Brendan Iribe. And Ollie Milroy, the British driver, the factory McLaren driver, will take the first stint. He was pinged for a track limits offence in qualifying, had a lap time disallowed, but was able to recover to the top 5, getting ahead of this car late in the session. And this is the car that brought out the second red flag, Stefan Ortelli in the AF Corsa APM Monaco Ferrari, that he will hand over to Angelo Negro at the pit stops. Then we have the first, really, of our championship contenders. Sally Yoluk in the TF Sport Aston Martin, just 2 points behind the 59 Teo Martin Motorsport car of Ramos and Chavez. They start a couple of places in front of them. Charlie Eastman will take over the second stint in that car. And then, alongside them, Nick Moss in the Optimum Motorsport McLaren, with Joe Osborne, another one of the McLaren factory drivers here this weekend, who will join in for the second stint. Well, last time out at Paul Ricard, it was the TF Sport car that had pole position for the first race, and the Aston Martin led the field into the first corner. It was all getting a bit physical into that first chicane, as it very often does, as the AF Corsa Ferrari was having to do some defending as well. In the end, though, it was a fairly straightforward victory as far as GTOpen races go for TF Sport, and Charlie Eastwood and Sally Yoluk got the race victory. They were a little further back on the grid for race 2, though. It was the AF Corsa Ferrari that got the early advantage, but there was going to be quite a bit of contact further back, as Florian Scholz was involved in some contact with one of the big Bentleys that are not here this weekend. At the front of the field, the TF Sport Aston Martin was doing its best to contend for the race lead, whilst one of the McLarens had a puncture. It was the number 17 car, though, of Louis Pret and Vincent Abril that took their second victory of the season. They're the first team to have been able to win more than one race this year. We've had 4 races and 3 different winners, so it's a very, very evenly matched field that we've got this year, and the championship is very much reflecting that, given just how tight the point situation is coming into this race, not just in the overall championship, but also within the various classes, because all of the teams are fighting for the outright championship, but there are also separate classes for Pro, Pro-Am and Am teams, and they're all racing for honours amongst themselves too, so I'll get into that in a bit more detail once we get into the race, which is not that far away now. The cars are being fired up, we're ready to go racing. Ready to go racing then here at the Red Bull Ring. Here is how the cars line up. It's Fran Rueda and Louis Pret on the front row of the grid together. The McLaren ahead of the Ferrari. Then the KTM Crossbow of Stefan Rossina has Sam Dehaan in the Ram Racing Mercedes for company on row number 2. Row 3 for Ollie Milroy, the first of the Optimum Motorsport McLarens, and then the second of the AF Corsa Ferrari, Stefan Ortelli, is alongside him. And then, second place in the championship, Sally Yoluk for TF Sport is only 7th on the grid, ahead of the second Optimum car, started by Nick Moss. Miguel Ramos, the championship leader, is down in 9th, ahead of Patrick Krupinski, who is the last of the Pro-Am cars. And then the 4 Ams at the back, Florian Scholz and Alexander Moisev in their pair of McLaren AMG GT3s, with Christian Hook and Nicky Luttweiler in the Porsche at the back. But of course, we didn't really get to see the best of Luttweiler in qualifying, because he had that mechanical problem that forced him to pull off at the side of the road. Formation lap then underway here at the Red Bull Ring. Fran Rueda leading the field around in his Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren. But it's the other Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren that we, in a way, need to watch for here, because it's desperately important for Miguel Ramos to make up some positions here at the start of the race. You can see there the blue McLaren in the middle of the field, starting all the way down in 9th position, and that is not at all where he needed to be as far as the championship standings are concerned. He really needs to take some points back away potentially here from the TF Sport car that starts only a couple of places in front of them, of course. Third in the championship are Louis Pret and Vincent Abril, though, so in a way the big winners after qualifying were the AF Corsa team, who managed to qualify second. They're only 4 points off the championship lead. The top 3 teams covered by just 4 points, and so Pret and Abril in good shape here potentially to take some points back from those two. A win or even a podium here could give them the championship lead, and then it's a little bit of a jump back, another 10 points back to Patrick Krupinski and Christian Klean's JP Motorsport Mercedes, and they're 8 points then ahead of Marcello Hahn in the number 16 Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren, that of course is on pole position. He's got Fran Rueda for his co-driver this weekend, but he's had a couple of different co-drivers over the course of the year. Well, we've got 8 different manufacturers represented on the International GTOpen grid this weekend, and a really competitive field of cars and teams too. And as the field makes its way now up towards the final couple of corners in beautiful 2x2 formation, it's the McLaren of Fran Rueda on the pole. Louis Pret looking to try and take advantage of the front row starting position that he earned in qualifying to maybe go and get another race victory. Remember, Louis Pret and Vincent Abril already twice winners this year. Into the final corner then. Getting ready, watching for the red lights. It's sometimes an advantage to start on the second row in these rolling starts, I've found, so keep an eye to Sam de Haan in the Mercedes and Stefan Rosina in the KTM, who are not scoring points. The lights go out, we're away and racing here at the Red Bull Ring. A good start made by Fran Rueda from pole position. He will lead the field comfortably into turn number 1. It's Rosina who attacks on the inside of the Ferrari for second place, and the KTM, in its first ever appearance in the championship, is running second as it comes out of turn number 1. Louis Pret runs out wide over the curb and slots in line in third, just ahead of Sam de Haan. Then it looks like Ollie Milroy in fifth, with Stefan Ortelli in 6th position. So more or less grid order, with that one change being the one for second place. On board with de Haan now as he tries to find a way past Louis Pret in front of him, and heads out of turn number 3 and down the hill again, side by side between Milroy and Stefan Ortelli. Look, Ortelli trying to go around the outside for 4th position now as they drop down the hill into turn 4. The Ferrari is very late on the brakes. It's too late on the brakes though. Runs wide onto the dirty part of the road. They delay each other slightly, and then it is Miguel Ramos next. So Miguel Ramos has had a fantastic start, having started all the way down in 9th place. He's into 7th already, and crucially ahead of the TF Sport Aston Martin that is only 2 points behind them in the championship. So a really good start this for Miguel Ramos, and he's made one of the most important overtakes that he'll probably make all day long. There's Nick Moss we caught a glimpse of in the black and green McLaren, the 72 car. And Nicky Lundvall there having a go on the inside into the penultimate corner. That was a brave move, and it was Alex Moisev that he went past. Runs very wide on the exit. Moisev tries to fight back, can't get to the inside into the final turn. Porsche making ground up then. Ollie Milroy is up the inside of Sam de Haan. This is for 4th position now. Optimum Motorsport go through into the top 4. Good first part of the race this for Ollie Milroy then. He's gained the position now and sets off after Louis Pret in the Ferrari. So the McLaren of Fran Rueda then leads the way. Stefan Rosina is 2nd, Louis Pret is 3rd, Ollie Milroy is now 4th, Sam de Haan 5th, then the battle on for 6th place. Look, as Miguel Ramos wants to get past Stefan Ortelli, 2 drivers who've been racing in GTOpen for a number of years, 2 of the most experienced hands on the grid, and they've got themselves absolutely together as they round turn 3 once again. In the AM class, Florian Scholz is still leading in the yellow Mercedes, and he's got a car between himself actually and Nicky Lundvall in the Porsche. That car being Nick Moss's McLaren, you can see there at the back of the queue. Ooh, Ramos runs out wide, and sorry, not Ramos, Ortelli runs out wide, and so up the inside goes Miguel Ramos, trying to get this place away. There's contact between the Ferrari and the McLaren once and twice as they go into turn number 6. That was risky stuff for the championship leader, who was trying to force the issue around the outside, but Stefan Ortelli was having absolutely none of it, and into the corner at which he spun in qualifying, he well and truly got his elbows out there to try and keep the McLaren at bay, and succeeded in doing so as well. The Ferrari stays ahead then in 6th position, Ramos 7th, Saliolic behind them in 8th, and there, look, that is the AM leader, Florian Scholz, attacking Patrick Krupinski, but of course Krupinski also an AM driver, just in a pro-AM lineup. Here's the replay, look. Ramos and Ortelli, we've seen some absolutely spectacular battles between these two over the years in GTOpen, and in 2020 they're continuing it as the Teo Martin squad hold their breath in the pit lane, I think is the best way to describe that, but thankfully they came out of it without any problems. Getting a notification on the timing screen that the start is under investigation, but no specific cars being mentioned as having done anything wrong, so that might just be a standard procedure with the rolling start. We're also being reminded that flashing of the headlights is not allowed in this championship, which I think is a great rule. Drivers love to flash the headlights to try and distract the cars in front of them, but so it doesn't really work. Sam Dahan then in the 69 car. Now, he is an AM driver. Oh, and again, a mistake look from Ortelli. That's the second lap in a row that he's done that at turn 4. And Miguel Ramos this time gets himself back alongside there. This is exactly the position they were in a lap ago. And there's more contact, and this time the wing mirror falls loose on the Ferrari. And up the inside goes Sally Yolok trying to take advantage. The top 2 cars in the championship are side by side into turn number 7. And thankfully, Yolok backed out of that one because I think Ramos was going to turn in regardless of whether the Aston Martin was on the inside line. And this is all getting very physical. 2 laps in a row then, Ortelli and Ramos have had contact. It looks like it's the Ferrari that came off worse as far as bodywork damage is concerned, but the McLaren is the one that's now losing ground on track and having to defend from their main championship rivals, in a way, the TF Sport Aston Martin. But as I made the point earlier on, they're also only 4 points clear of the AF Corsa Ferrari that currently sits in 3rd position. So the McLaren does need to get on with this, which is why he's being aggressive, trying to work his way through the pack. Look, Weiler there. Here's the replay. Well, it does look a little bit like Ramos tried to shut the door there, but he wasn't clear of the Ferrari. And, yeah, the team, again, offer their opinions on what's going on track. I'm sure both teams will have a different view of that. Incident involving cars 48 and 59 under investigation. That's not a huge surprise. That's Ortelli and Ramos. Whether that's the first or second bit of contact, I'm not sure. You'd imagine probably the latter. That was the more significant example. Again, Ortelli runs wide. That's 3 laps in a row now, but this time Ramos isn't close enough to take advantage. I'll get back to the point I was making a lap ago now, then, which is that Sam Dahan there in the black and pink Mercedes is 5th place overall, but he is the highest placed AM driver on the grid. Of course, he'll hand over to a pro in the shape of Callum McLeod and pit stops, but Sam Dahan in theory should not be as quick as the pro drivers behind him. Ortelli, Ramos, Sally Yolok as well. They're all pro drivers. That's why the Mercedes is kind of the cork in the bottle at the moment. But the idea is that when he then hands over to Callum McLeod for the second half of the race, he will then be quicker than the AM drivers that have taken over the other pro-AM cars. 44 car making good progress. That's Florian Scholz, who's got past Patrick Krupinski now. And the AM leader is up into 9th place overall. That's the yellow Mercedes. If you look by the second in AM, with Alexander Moisev 3rd. Right, car 48, reprimand for driving behaviour, which is Stefan Ortelli. So the stewards have looked at the incident. They've decided it was Ortelli to blame, but it didn't warrant a penalty. It was just a verbal warning, essentially. But that means that he's on their watch list now. If he does anything else that they don't like, then the 48 Ferrari could well find itself in a little bit more trouble. The 48 car is languishing rather in the points. They've only scored 2 points so far this year, and they've yet to have, they've had 1 top 10 finish, which was in the most recent race in World Car, 9th place. That is their best result of the year so far. Certainly not going the way that you'd expect for A, an experienced team, and B, certainly in the shape of Stefan Ortelli, a very experienced driver. On board with Nick Moss now in the Optimum Motorsport McLaren, and you can see filling his, well, not mirrors, but his rear-facing camera on the dash is Nicky Luttweiler in the Porsche. So he tries to continue making ground, and again, similar situation here for Nick Moss. He is the AM driver. Joe Osborne, who will take over at the pit stops, is the pro, so that car should gain ground later on. There is the lead for Fran Rueda, then getting away from Stefan Rossina now in 2nd place, but the KTM Crossbow, having made that good start, getting into P2, is trying to go after him. Louis Pret in 3rd, Ollie Milroy is going with them in 4th, and then it's the gap back to that Sam Dahan train of cars fighting for 5th place on back. Rueda then 3.8 seconds clear of Rossina in 2nd position, but Rossina doesn't look like he's under that much pressure in 2nd place. He's keeping a nice gap back to Louis Pret in 3rd. McLaren is applying the pressure to him. Replay of Sally Yolok going wide here out of the penultimate corner. And the red TF Sport Aston Martin. Tom Ferriers and the team watch on from the pit garage. And they will be hoping not to see too much more of that. That definitely would count as exceeding track limits, but it didn't really gain anything at that point. TF Sport, who got their first win at Paul Ricard, their first win of the season, after a podium for that car at the Hungaroring. They had a first and a third then at Ricard, but that of course does mean that they will have a slightly bigger handicap going into the pit stops. They're going to have to spend a bit longer in the pit lane than some of those that missed out on the podium in the recent races. Right, I've said earlier on the start was being investigated. The outcome of that is that car 34 is being reprimanded for breaking formation before the starting signal. That's Sally Yolok in the Aston Martin that we just saw running wide. So Sally Yolok, again, not a penalty, just a verbal warning essentially, which is from very wide again in the background there, going out of turn number 10. But Sally Yolok has been warned for an indiscretion at the start of the race. So things calming down now. Let's bring in Elliot Wood, who's joined me again up in the commentary box. And well, when you came into the box about 10 minutes or so into the race, did you expect to see Fran Rueda have such a big lead? And did you expect it to be over the KTM that has amazingly got itself into second place?
I thought the KTM might have done well on the first lap, but to be honest, we haven't really seen any race run data from this car, so no idea what to expect. And with Fran Rueda as well, of those two cars, I would have expected the Miguel Ramos car to be the one that would race away into the lead. But obviously Ramos is down in 7th and Fran Rueda's got a pretty substantial lead. Yes,
and Ramos has not been making friends either. He's had contact with Stefano Ortelli not once, not twice, but 3 times already in this race. The last of those times earning him an official reprimand as well. Stefano Ortelli here in the Ferrari then is trying to find a way past Sam Dahan still, who, as I said, is the leading AM driver in the race in the Ram Racing Mercedes. Now, this car does not score points, so in a way, although it's the fight for 5th on the track, the Ferrari of Ortelli is already on course for 5th place points if you were to throw the checkered flag now, but he wants to get past the Mercedes so he can chase after the leaders.
And KTM's not cancelled for points either, so that should be 4th place.
Good point, yes, absolutely right. So the KTM and the Ram Racing Mercedes as guest entries into the championship don't score championship points. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The Ferrari is already running well, I suppose, as far as points are concerned, but the Mercedes is still physically there. It's still physically holding him up, and he definitely still wants to get past it so that he could chase after Ollie Milroy in front. The Ferrari mid-engined, of course, the McLaren behind, also mid-engine car, but the Mercedes leading them round. The engine is hanging out over that front axle, and that really, that's one of the great fascinations of GT3 racing for me, is that you do have, there are lots of different ways of designing a GT car. We've got examples of front engine, mid-engine and rear engine cars in this field, and at certain circuits, but even certain parts of certain circuits, each of those different platforms will have certain advantages that they try to exploit.
Yeah, and none of these cars were designed with entering International GTOpen in mind. They were designed with selling to customers in mind. And then they were turned into racing cars. So it's always interesting to see how the road characteristics turn over into racing characteristics as well. Just looking at timing screens, Fran Rueda casually setting his like 4th or 5th best lap in the 1 minute 29. No one else has even reached the 1 minute 29 yet. So an incredible job by him at the moment.
Yeah, and his last lap was only 300ths away from his best lap of the race that he set on the 5th lap. We're on the 8th lap now. And all of the battling is happening behind him, basically. Fran Rueda, he will hand over that number 16 car, of course, at the pit stops to Marcello Ham. And Marcello Ham, last time out, was nowhere near the podium, actually, at Paul Ricard, so they shouldn't have a handicap penalty. Now, the KTM, just as I was saying nice things about how it was keeping the Ferrari of Louis Pret at bay, all of a sudden that gap has disappeared. On the previous lap, Louis Pret was about half a second quicker. He's right on the tail of the KTM now, but the KTM has good straight line speed. Again, not necessarily the area I expected it to excel in.
Yeah, but it's a very small car compared to its rivals, so it's also doing a good job because it can't obviously use as much road as the others can in defending. Also, it's kept its lights on all the way through qualifying in the race, and while that is allowed, if it then starts turn them on and off again, you can get warnings for that, even if you're the car up front, because flashing is not allowed in GT racing.
Yes, literally halfway around the first lap, drivers were getting warned about that. I think 1 or 2 of them had forgotten. Of course, a lot of these drivers race in lots of different GT championships around the world, certainly the pro drivers, and each has slightly different rules. Nice battle this, though, between Rosina, Pret and Milroy. Again, 3 different makes of car here, KTM, Ferrari and McLaren. They're all struggling to close in, though, on Fran Rueda, who has just put in the fastest middle sector of anybody. As we head back to the battle now that's been ongoing all race long, really, between Ortelli and Ramos. Ramos, we said in qualifying that Miguel really needed to have a good start and try and make up for that poor qualifying effort. He did. He immediately got into seventh place within the first couple of corners, and now he's stuck. He just cannot find a way past the Ferrari of Stefan Ortelli, who is being fairly robust in his defence.
Yeah, and it's also going to come into play with the pit stop penalties once we get to that phase of the race. That these cars are all so close, but they're differing time and amount of time they need to stay in the pits is going to change that battle up again. And with the KTM, it's a guest car, so I imagine it would just be the spec 65 seconds. Presumably, it's there's literally no precedent for what this car can do and how long it needs to be in the pits for. And I remember it was 2 days ago, we were in a scrutineering meeting. They were actually discussing what changes they can actually make to the KTM. Now it's a newly homologated car in GT3. And something to do with the windscreen and that the number, you put your number on so you can identify which car it is, was too big for the car. And they're complaining about that because of how bad the visibility is in there. So very interesting things that this KTM's having to go through this weekend. It's a whole learning process for the team, for the car, I guess for the scrutineers as well in this championship.
Oh, another mistake there for Stefan Ortelli, and that's about the fourth time we've seen him do this. Now, this is what happened when they made contact earlier on. The McLaren gets to the outside, into the left-hander, and Ortelli makes a right hash of turn number 6, runs wide again. That's the corner he went off at in qualifying, and finally, thinks Miguel Ramos, I've got through, and now he can try and chase after Sam Dahan. Sally Yolek is on his toes to try and take advantage of that as well in the red Aston Martin, but not quite able to do it. So it only took him about 25 minutes, but finally Miguel Ramos has got the number 59 Teo Martin McLaren into 6th place. He should be quicker than Sam Dahan, the AM driver in front of him, and here is a replay of how he did it. Nicely done. Oh, got to the outside. The Ferrari just couldn't stop, and again, that corner, it seems to be struggling under the brakes. It is about 4 or 5 times now that we've seen Ortelli run wide into turn number 4, and that downhill braking zone he seems to be struggling, and even there into turn number 6, the car didn't seem to want to turn in. The Ferrari is normally known for being quite good on the brakes, and that is a bit strange.
Well, we could actually see him at the wheel there, and he didn't. He literally turned in at the very last moment. So I expect he would have been trail braking, expecting to have the McLaren on the outside, keep it there as long as possible, then turn in, then realise the car just doesn't actually have that performance when he wants it, and hence McLaren tucked in and got through.
Nick Moss here, dicing away with the Mercedes of Patrick Krupinski here. This is Nick Moss, who is the last of the Pro-Am runners, and the in fact, these are the last 2 Pro-Am runners in the race right now, and he has a big lunge up the inside of the number 88 JP Motorsport Mercedes into turn 4. No way, and Nicky Luttweiler is staying with them. Luttweiler running in the AM class, but of course he's the same kind of speed as these AM drivers running in the Pro-Am cars. The blue numbers on your graphics are Pro-Ams, the greens, green backgrounds are the AM drivers, and the red background numbers are the all-pro lineups that we would always expect to be the ones at the end of the race fighting for victory. A nice little battle pack this, though. The Mercedes, the McLaren and the Porsche. Again, great variety. I made the point at the start of the race. We have 8 different manufacturers represented on the grid this weekend, and they're all so evenly matched. It's fantastic.
Yeah, although having said that, Fran Raider is still lapping consistently a second faster than anyone. Miguel Ramos, his teammate, has just broken into the 1 minute 29, so it's clear that car is capable of that pace. But the other Pro-Am entries that Fran Raider is supposedly racing against are at least 1.2 seconds off average per lap, which means after 11 laps he already has a 10.3 second lead.
Yeah, and that includes, of course, Ollie Milroy in another McLaren, albeit an Optimum Motorsport car, another pro driver as well. So that's the most obvious comparison, isn't it, between the Teo Martin cars and Milroy in the Optimum car. And Teo Martin just seemed to have a little bit of an edge, although it must be said that Milroy is stuck a little bit behind Louis Prett's Ferrari and Stefan Rossina's KTM, so it could be that he could go quicker. Oh, Nicky Luttweiler, I don't know if he was distracted then going down the hill, but he had 2 wheels on the grass where he really didn't need to there, and just had to come off the throttle slightly to avoid spinning in a straight line, which would have been embarrassing all round. But the Porsche, again, good traction from the rear-engined car out of the tight corners, but maybe a bit of instability through some of the higher speed stuff. Great to have Porsche on board, though, in GTOpen this year, and He is one of the front-runners in the AM Championship at the moment as well. Teams watching on from the pit lane nervously as the Optimum Motorsport car tries here to keep itself in contention, but the trouble is that that car and the 88 car, they're losing so much time now in the first stint that even when they plug their pro drivers into the second stint, they're going to struggle probably to get back into contention.
I'm wondering if we took Stefan Rosina and this KTM out of the equation, if these, the Louis Pret car and the Ollie Milroy car would actually be maybe like 6 or 7 seconds further up the road, because it's clear they're only stuck behind him, and we've saw the pace of the Miguel Ramos car as soon as it's in clean air. It's kind of almost matched Fran Rueda's pace, as the Optimum car has a little look there. So I think this KTM is actually acting as a roadblock.
Yeah, the trouble they're having here, Pret and Milroy, as they now start to fight each other for third position, heading down the hill. Milroy pulls to the outside, and his teammate, Nick Moss, has a big go up the inside of Krupinski, goes through on the inside at turn 3, then runs out wide, and that's the classic turn 3 over-under move. Down at turn 4, a similar thing is being attempted by Milroy. Gets a good exit from the corner. Louis Pret covers the left-hand side of the road into the left-hander at turn 6. Ferrari and McLaren, we've had contact here between Ferraris and McLarens already in this race. These two so far keeping it clean, but look at the way they're holding each other up. Rosina is getting away now, and the Ferrari does indeed hang on to the spot. Great racing.
And Miguel Ramos is right on the tail of Sam Dahan now as well, so definitely the McLaren is the car to have at this point in the race. KTM's been given a bit of breathing room, I expect. Going to look after the tyres, and as soon as the two cars behind are on its tail again, it will just keep on doing what it was doing previously. Yeah, the point I was about to make before that all kicked off is that the problem that Louis Pret and Ollie Milroy are having is that they're quicker through the corners, but the KTM clearly has an edge down the straights, and it's so hard, especially around this track, to overtake a car that is outpowering you in a straight line, because you're just never close enough into all of the braking zones to actually find a way through. So they're going to have to regroup here, maybe stop falling over each other, and try and form a temporary alliance to work together and close in on the KTM ahead. They're only about 2.5 seconds ahead of Sam Dahan and Miguel Ramos as well, this group, so if they continue to trip over each other, it could become a 5 or 6 car train as Pret runs very, very wide there out of turn 3. One thing that will definitely be on Louis Pret's mind here is the championship situation. He's only 4 points off the championship lead, and both of the teams in front of them are way behind them in the race, although Ramos is now starting to make some progress back into 6th position. So as much as Pret wants to A, hang on to 3rd place, and B, if possible, get into 2nd ahead of Rosina, he can't afford contact and an off-road excursion, because that would then throw away this golden opportunity he's got to take some proper points out of the others and maybe even take the championship lead. Yeah, and I think the pace of the Miguel Ramos car as well can be explained by he knows he's got a success penalty to serve in the pit stop, so take more life out the tyres now, charge as much as you can, because otherwise you're going to be thrown back into the traffic of possibly the Pro-Am drivers or even the AM lead battle once he comes out of his pit stop. So it's a very strategic race, as well as a very side-by-side action race as well in GTOpen. Yeah, this race, of course, 10 minutes longer than the race tomorrow too, so they have to make those tyres last a little bit longer. Stefan Hortelli here is not happy that he's been overtaken by his race-long sparring partner, Miguel Ramos in the McLaren, and he's trying to get it back as they go into turn number 1. Yellow flag at turn 6, by the way, which is the first of the double left-handers in the middle sector. Who's not come through? Krupinski, I think, possibly. No, I think he has made it through. We'll try and get to the bottom of that in a moment. The safety car is being deployed, so someone is off, and this will be what it is. It's Nicky Luttweiler. Oh dear, and it was contact with Krupinski. I thought Krupinski had lost ground, but I didn't notice that Luttweiler had lost even more. That was a bit clumsy, that, wasn't it, really? It was. I think that'll definitely go down as avoidable contact. Yeah, and I think if he kept the engine running there, Luttweiler could have got out the gravel, but as we can see with the Mercedes, it is quite shallow gravel until you get further into the gravel trap, so opportunity lost there for Luttweiler, who is obviously fighting for a title here and in the GT Cup Open Series, which isn't racing this weekend, so he's got more energy to focus on GT Open. Well, it was showing in the first part of the race, because he started at the back after his mechanical problem in qualifying and very quickly worked his way through to 2nd in the AM class. Now, always winners and losers with safety cars. Big loser, Fran Rueda, he was 10 seconds up the road. That now disappears completely. The big winners, of course, those behind him, Rosina, but in particular, people like Louis Pret and Ollie Milroy, and you mentioned like Miguel Ramos as well, who was so far off the lead, 15 seconds off the lead after their slightly lowly grid position, and now that almost all gets
eradicated. When you've got a lead like Fran Rueda had, the last thing you want to see is yellow flags and that SC board.
Yeah, and I think setup will come into play here on the restart, because unlike a launch off the line, you're already going to be at almost racing speed when you approach turn 1. Here's a replay of this, already panel bashing out the corner before. I think he just punts him round, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think a misjudgment there maybe. I think obviously Luttweiler squeezed him on the run down into turn 6, and then Krupinski just tried to get in line behind him and maybe misjudged where the Porsche would be braking. Again, two completely different cars, front-engine Mercedes, rear-engine Porsche. They're going to have different braking points, different turning points, different ways of attacking each corner, and I think maybe the pair of AM drivers there, remember, neither of them are pro drivers, just a little miscommunication between the two.
Yeah, another point on the KTM, although I'm not sure if it actually is more powerful. I haven't seen the numbers, but I do know because it's based on a track car and kind of racing the KTM Crossbow Challenge makes is very aggressive. It's high acceleration offline. I think the gear ratio of the KTM helps it accelerate out the corners.
Yeah, that would make sense, wouldn't it? It seems to get off the tight corners really well. Replay of the start, and it was at the first of those tight corners that he got on the inside of Louis Pret and took second place away. Sander Hahn did his level best to go through with him, but wasn't able to do so. And then as they ran up the hill, it was Sander Hahn that was flashing his lights. Again, British GT driver, you're allowed to do that in British GT. That was the Ortelli-Ramos contact, actually the second bit of contact that they'd had to that point, and Sally Yolok trying to follow him through.
And that might explain why Ortelli let Miguel Ramos pass in such a way, because his right wing mirror came off in that instant there, so he couldn't have seen him on the right-hand side. Just brakes as late as possible and then didn't see him tucking in on the left.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I hadn't considered that. And then this one, well, you can't blame a lack of wing mirrors for that one, but a lack of spatial awareness. Oh yes, there it is.
Still see it on track.
It's come off now. It didn't come off straight away, so it's dropped off since then, clearly.
I saw it when I came in the box and I wasn't sure what it was, so I didn't point it out then. But yeah, it's quite a large wing mirror if it is a wing mirror.
It is. That'll make a nice souvenir for Marshall, won't it, at the end of the day, if it survives the rest of the race. The safety car's coming in this time, though, because you can see in the background that Nicky Luttweiler's Porsche has been retrieved. It's just heading down the circuit access road and will be allowed to rejoin the race, I think. I think that, again, GTOpen, a little different to some other series. You are allowed to continue, and he's still trying to... He's going to have to buy a ticket, I think, to get back into the track. He's that far away from the racetrack, but he will rejoin, and that means the race can restart. So we're not messing around here, straight back into racing action, and Fran Rueda not messing around either. A brilliant restart there, really anticipated that well, and already it's back to situation normal, really. He's got a gap over Rossina, Pret and Milroy, scrapping for second place. Up to the first corner they go. Ortelli and Ramos continuing their private battle in the background as well. And so actually, although the gaps have come down slightly, not much has changed there. Everyone's immediately kind of split up into their individual groups, and the battles that we had 5 minutes ago before the safety car can resume.
Yep, and especially if we've got lead battles and podium battles in the AM class, I think Nick Moss will have to hold off Alexander Moisek, because otherwise he's going to be stuck way behind Stefan Ortelli, who's the next driver up the road in the Pro-Am battle. Interesting to see the split times in the KTM versus Fran Rueda. So actually 3/10 faster through the first sector Stefan Rosina is. So potentially that would explain if it's faster out the corners. And sector 2 is pretty much all flat out. So we'll see the difference there as Fran Rueda should be hitting the split very soon.
Yeah, there's a speed trap on the run to turn 3 as well, and the KTM in second place was about 3 miles an hour quicker than the cars around it, so it definitely has a straight line speed advantage, but as you were saying, it may be more down to gear ratios and aerodynamics maybe more than engine power per se. Ollie Milroy powers his way up the hill towards the penultimate corner. Fran Rueda continues to pull away, and he's not let that safety car phase him one bit, has he? He's just got his head down and immediately started to build the margin up again. Drivers getting ready for pit stops, because would you believe it, we're already heading towards the pit window. The pit window opens in 45 seconds, so next time around we should start seeing some of the cars go into the pit lane, and you'd expect it to be the Pro-Am cars, wouldn't you, that have their AMs in the first stint. They're going to want to get in straight away. People like Nick Moss, for example, people like Sander Hahn, they're going to want to get in, get the pro driver in. For them, that safety car came at the perfect time.
Yeah, the more racing takes place on the circuit, the more marbles are going to be. So as an AM driver, you'd rather be at the start of the race rather than coming in halfway through, not knowing the condition of the track, and coming in at full racing speed straight away and, you know, possibly sliding off in the first lap. And we have seen that quite a few times in, especially the longer endurance races, where people aren't thinking how much the track has changed in the space of an hour of racing.
And it can be difficult to jump into a car halfway through a race and you haven't had a chance to see for yourself how the track's evolving. The pro driver can maybe speak to you on the radio as they're driving around and let you know, but there's nothing quite like being out there and experiencing it yourself. I saw a moment ago, by the way, team manager for car 88, which is the JP Motorsport Patrick Krupinski car, being asked to report to the head teacher's office and speak to race control about that contact they had with Nicky Luttweiler, who is 2 laps down but is still circulating. So who's going to dive for the pit lane then? The pit lane window is now open. I wonder whether Louis Pret might come in because he's starting to feel the pressure here from Ollie Milroy. Pret is sideways and yet dives in. He did not enjoy the pressure he was under. Sam Dahan is in, Miguel Ramos is in. That's interesting. I didn't think Ramos would be that keen to get into the pit lane, but already then the first set of driver change is about to happen.
I think Sally Yolok is in as well.
Yes, he is. So is Nick Moss. That's not such a great surprise. The AM cars, or the Pro-Am cars with the AM drivers in them coming in.
And Ramos has an advantage here because the McLaren Teo Martin is actually the first into the pit lane, and then it's the AF Course Ferraris next. So once everyone's into the pits, this McLaren has a clean run coming out.
Yeah, there's no one immediately in front, whereas the AF Corsa team have the Optimum Motorsport McLaren right in front of them. You can see the little sandwich that TF Sport have got themselves in as well. So over half the field are pitted though, only 5 cars staying out. So Fran Rueda stays out, Stefan Rosina stays out, Ollie Milroy, Stefan Ortelli and Florian Schultz. They're the only 5 cars that have not dived for the pit lane. So we'll now wait and see what the order is going to be here. Waiting to see how the handicaps come into play too. When they came in, it was the first of the cars in was the 17, wasn't it? Vincent Abril is now on board that car. There is your race leader, Fran Rueda. Now again, I'm going to guess that he's not really in a hurry to hand over here to Marcello Hahn, because Marcello is the AM driver, and that's the fascination here, isn't it? Because he is a pro driver, he's built up this nice lead, but it more than likely will disappear in the second half of the race.
And I think Ramos has just passed, it wouldn't be Ortelli, it'd be the Abril car on pit lane because it had to let it past, because it was coming from behind. So that's a great bit of pit work, and I think both of those cars actually filled up very heavily with fuel. So I expect they're going to be going flat out for the duration, whereas the Nick Moss Optimum McLaren didn't look like it took on too much fuel. So perhaps they're going to be rationing it out for the rest of the race.
Now, this is interesting. Those that have pitted have come out just around the race leaders, so they're a lap behind the leaders, but the leaders are now stuck in traffic, essentially, until they dive for the pit lane. Drive-through for the 88 car, which has just been taken over by Christian Klein, ex-Formula 1 racer, for causing a collision. And that's a shame for Christian. It wasn't him that caused the collision. He wasn't even in the car, but his co-driver, Patrick Krupinski, getting them in trouble. Side by side here, this is 4 position. Joe Osborne and Charlie Eastwood, 2 of the best of British drivers in the field, and Joe Osborne going through on the inside line then. So the TF Sport car, which was on the podium at Paul Ricard last time, they've consistently been finishing on the podium. They had a win and a third at Paul Ricard. They had one of the biggest handicaps to serve. That's why they've fallen down the order. And the other one, of course, that we mentioned was the 17 car that was driven by Louis Pret. It's now been handed over to Vincent Abril. Elliot mentioned that had lost ground. That's because they won last time out as well. So they had to serve extra time in the pit lane. So we're already seeing the effect that those handicaps have.
And Enrique Chavez has actually just set the car's personal best middle sector, and Callum McLeod in the number 69 McLaren, I believe, personal best final sector. So of the cars that didn't refuel as much, they're making the gains there, and obviously new tyres as well, which is going to be a massive advantage.
Attacking the pit entry there was Stefan Rosina, so he is in now in the KTM. Again, that's an all-pro driver lineup, so it doesn't matter massively when they come in. But yes, Callum McLeod then in that 69 Mercedes is, again, the pro driver, so he should be going quicker in a way than Sam Dahan was earlier on. In comes Rosina then. Patrick Niederhauser will take over, and we get a good look now at how the pit stops work. Change of tyres whilst the driver change is ongoing. And you
can see how much of a cramped space that KTM is to get the seat in and out, as well as the driver.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not an easy job, especially if there's a bit of a height difference between the 2 drivers as well. Team manager for car 17 being told to report to race control. Now that's AF Corsa. What have they done now? Vincent Abril is now in the 17 car. It was Louis Pret that was in it before.
I'm thinking that might have been the pit stop, but they did let the McLaren pass before they released the car. So I don't think it would have been for that. We're seeing faster speed trap figures for Fran Rueda and Ollie Milroy. Is that because they've got other cars around them? They've finally got a slipstream after 31 minutes of action.
Yeah, well, certainly Fran Rueda hasn't had anyone to get a slipstream from, has he, so far in this race?
And Ortelli is on last warning for track limits, and because Ortelli's been the only one in this car, that is all on him for track limits at turns 1, 9 and 10, so a penalty be next. I imagine the stewards will be wanting to make a decision on this before they take the pit stop, so they can just add it to the pit stop time rather than fussing about and adding like a drive-through or a time penalty later.
Yes, that will be interesting. We'll keep an eye on that. Again, I'm not surprised with the amount of warnings that we were getting in the early part of the race. Not surprised at all to see that.
And Enrique Chavez has just set the fastest lap of the race of 1 minute 29.22. Oh, is that because of the pit entry?
Yeah, so that's Louis Pret coming in. He had a moment going through turn 9, and I think that meant he was a bit wide when he tried to come into the pit lane, and yeah, he might have crossed the line going in. I'm not sure what the call will be there, but that's why the team manager is being asked to report to race control immediately, so that potentially is going to be a problem for AF Corsa then. As on track, Fran Rueda continues to lead the way in the number 16 car. The car just in front of him is a car that's lapped down, that has pitted, one of the AF Corsa Ferraris. That I think will be Vincent Abril in the number 17 Ferrari. So of those that have made their pit stop then, Patrick Niederhauser, no, I think he's just on an out lap actually, isn't he? No, the 24 car, yeah, that's right. So the Patrick Niederhauser in the KTM is the leader of the cars that have stopped. Again, because it didn't have a success penalty, it's the first race that it's had in the championship. Second place of those that have stopped around racing with Callum McLeod, and then Enrique Chavez in the 59 McLaren. So the big losers there, Abril has dropped down the order, and Charlie Eastwood really has now come out a lot further back than that car was earlier on. So we're into the second phase now of this pit window, where the pro drivers that were already in the cars are wanting to stay in as long as possible, but at some point, well, within the next 7.25 minutes, they will have to pit.
And although Fran Rueda is still lapping the 1 minute 29s, which is very commendable, I think he may lose the lead in this, because at least 2 seconds a lap is being gained with these fresh tyres on all the cars that are pitted. Just seeing Enrique Chavez dip below the 1 minute 29 for the first time, 1 minute 28.937, so he's taken out a second out of Fran Rueda. The safety car brought the gap down from, 10 seconds to around 3 seconds. So potentially when Rueda pits, he isn't going to emerge in the lead. Patrick Niederhauser or Enrique Chavez might be the car he comes out just behind or just in front of.
And of course, Rueda is handing over to an AM driver, Marcello Han, albeit a reasonably experienced one, but still an AM racer nonetheless. And he will have pro drivers behind him that he's having to try and fend off. So into the pit lane, by the way, have come the 44 Get Speed Performance Mercedes. Jens Liebhauser taking over from Florian Schultz, and that leaves now just the top 3 drivers, Rueda, Milroy and Ortelli. All of them Pro-Am cars being driven by the pro driver.
And Patrick Niederhauser's car is now under investigation. Team manager to report to race control immediately. The fact that it's come up alongside a message of Vincent Abril would probably suggest it's for the same reason. So it might be pit entry if they've been summoned at the same time.
Yeah, that's quite possible. We didn't see the pit entry for the 24 car, but that's a fair assumption to make, I think. So waiting to see how this is all going to play out. 16, 7 and 48, all still yet to make their pit stops. I don't think any of them are going to have a handicap to serve, because none of them were on the podium last time at Paul Ricard, so they should come out more or less where they were in the running order. But then, as we've said, the slower driver will be getting on board. They're not going to pit for the next 5.5 minutes though, I don't think.
I think Niederhauser's going to come out in the lead, because he's 1 minute 13 behind Fran Rueda, and Fran Rueda hasn't pitted yet. As he now goes a lap down because Fran Rueda's crossed the line, it's a 1 minute 30 lap, so the KTM could have a gap of possibly 20 seconds over the Fran Rueda car at this rate.
Yeah, it's definitely looking good, isn't it? They are lapping consistently quicker than the McLaren, which can't really make any ground up on the Ferrari in front, and that is interesting, because in the first stint of the race, Rueda had been able to pull well away from the number 17 car, but now on fresh tyres, Vincent Abril is able to at least match the race leader and possibly go quicker.
Yeah, and Niederhauser's just set the fastest first and second sectors of anyone. I expect this will be a sub 1 minute 29 lap. This is very interesting how this strategy is playing out. And also the fact that although Fran Rueda is clearly losing time here, will they lose more time if they brought in the AM driver earlier? So, it's a debate to have within the team.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're trying to work out. Are you going to lose more time running around with a pro driver on old tyres or an AM driver on new tyres? That's going to be the question.
Niederhauser takes out another second from Fran Rueda's lead, 1 minute 12.579, so that's, 26 seconds. He might come out for the good.
And a full second quicker than Rueda that time. So, yeah, that is a fairly sizable margin that the KTM could have on its debut in the championship. Battle here between Joe Osborne and Charlie Eastwood then. Eastwood in the TF Sport Aston Martin. This race hasn't really gone the way TF Sport would have liked, but I mean, okay, they've had to serve their handicap, which definitely hasn't helped, but that car has not looked as pacey this weekend as it did certainly at Paul Ricard last time, but even as it did at the Hungaroring. It must just be a circuit that doesn't particularly suit this Aston Martin, but TF Sport with Charlie Eastwood and Sally Yoluk have not been all that competitive really since we arrived at the Red Bull Ring a couple of days ago. And this is all for position as well. The Mercedes in front is Jens Liebhauser, who is an AM driver, who has managed to leapfrog ahead of the Aston Martin as a result of the Aston's handicap. So these two are now going to both get bottled up behind an AM driver who doesn't have to move out of their way, but in all likelihood probably will not make life too difficult for the pros behind. Three cars all running in different classes here then. The AM car is the Mercedes, the Pro-Am car is the McLaren, Pro car is the Aston Martin behind.
And I think what would have disadvantaged Aston Martin as well is there was only one Aston Martin car running in International GTOpen RCS, so they have less mileage than all the other manufacturers, even KTM, given it's its locally developed car on this circuit. So all these other teams have loads of setup data. They know how to optimise it for late race, early race, low fuel, etc. And this Aston Martin is still learning with TF Sport. There's a lot of action going on now between the three of them. Is this for class position as well?
They're all in different classes, but they're all fighting for track position. This is for 8th place, Liebhauser, Osborne and Eastwood. So whilst it doesn't matter particularly for their individual championship standings, or their individual class standings, oh, well, that made it easy. Liebhauser outbrakes himself into turn 3. Up the inside goes Joe Osborne. And did Charlie Eastwood follow him? Joe will be hoping not, because if Eastwood, oh no, he has now got up the inside of the Mercedes and goes ahead. So there we are. That was the mistake from the AM driver, which is what you might expect given the pressure that Joe Osborne and Charlie Eastwood were both putting under. Now they set off after the next group, but they are about 5.5 seconds behind Vincent Abril in the AF Corsa Ferrari, which is dropping back from Enrique Chavez. So the Ferrari that was up there potentially fighting for the lead early on is not going to be after the stops at all.
Well, I think Chavez has upped his pace again. Fran Raider only really has one more opportunity to come to the pits because there's only 90 seconds left of the pit window to change cars. He is currently in the 3rd sector of the lap. So yeah, and he's in the pits. Leader is in the pits, so he's got a 9.3 second advantage at present over Ollie Milroy. We'd expect him to come into the pits as well, as he has, and that's allowed, it does look like one of the Mercedes to go past, but that might be a car that's a lap down.
Right, okay, yes, because the other car that should pit is Ortelli, and then everybody else has already pitted. Yeah, they're all in now, because with a minute left on the clock, they didn't have time to do another lap, so this is it. This will be absolutely pivotal for the outcome of this race. Just under 29 minutes left on the clock. Ollie Milroy is in to hand over the Optimum Motorsport McLaren. Marcello Hahn has taken over the Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren, and the 48 car, Angelo Negro, I'll get that right in a minute. Angelo Negro will take over the 48 machine. There's the replay of the mistake that was made by Liebhauser, and yeah, I think once he lost one place to Osborne, he then pulled over basically, put the indicator on to let Charlie Eastwood go through, and so the Aston Martin was able to drive past on the run down the next straight. So, as that replay takes place, out of the window I can see the pit stops being complete. There is Marcello Hahn, so he is heading up the pit lane, and where is the chasing pack?
The KTM is coming out the final corner now, going up the pit straight. We may have got our calculations. We can see it in shot now, so it's approaching turn 1 at a far higher speed, but once it's at turn 1, the McLaren will still be ahead. This is far closer than we thought it was going to be. KTM, does it have the ability to get past that McLaren on very cold but fresh tyres?
Well, this is now a pro driver in the KTM, which is Patrick Niederhauser, against an AM driver, Marcello Hahn, in the McLaren. So the KTM should have the advantage, and he's got 27.5 minutes left to try and make this work. So Well, let's see what happens. Side by side between the AF Corsa teammates, meanwhile. The 17 is Vincent Abril, 48 Angelo Negro now, and it is 17, is it? Yes, that's gone through. So 17 was ahead of 48 anyway, but the gap between those two cars before the pit stops was a lot bigger than it is now, and we're side by side for the race lead into the middle sector. The McLaren has the inside line for the left-hander at turn 6, but I don't think that's going to matter because right around the outside goes the KTM. Can Patrick Niederhauser get the lead away? No, not on this occasion. The McLaren hangs on. As you said, Elliot, he's on cold tyres at the moment, is Marcello Han. He's even more vulnerable to attack than he normally would be. If he can get those tyres up to temperature, he might have a fighting chance of keeping the KTM behind, but I do think Niederhauser is quicker.
Oh, and he took a little bite of the brake there and it hit the curve and it got very loose. This time last year, Marcello Han would not have been able to hold that KTM back, so huge improvements as a driver to have done that this time round. KTM, I don't think it, unless it forces a mistake, I don't think it can get past now. The gap's just, you know, in that little distance where you can't make a move without diving and possibly ruining your tyres, but equally you're close enough that you're always in their mirrors, so you can almost drive the car ahead of you.
Of course, they're also being caught by Callum McLeod in the Ram Racing Mercedes. Here he comes, that speed of the KTM pulls him alongside, and now he's got the inside line into turn number 3. This surely is it for Patrick Niederhauser. He moves to the apex, he gets the car stopped, and KTM lead in the International GTOpen for the first time. Fantastic stuff then. Remember, this car isn't scoring points, but my word, they would still willingly take the winner's trophy at the end of this race if it's presented to them. And now he should, I reckon, have the pace to get away.
And now the car number 16 is being asked to report to race control. I think pretty much every car that has pitted after pitting has been asked to report to race control. As we're seeing, is that the Nick Moss McLaren, although obviously Nick Moss isn't in the car anymore, against the Charlie Eastwood Aston Martin. Very close there. That track limit offence turn 3, but at the same time, who was to blame in that?
Yeah, Eastwood here looks a bit quicker than Osborne at the moment, but that might just be because Osborne's been a bit wide in the previous corner, got dirt on his tyres, and we'll see a replay first of the race lead changing. And yeah, the straight line speed advantage the KTM has was enough to pull him alongside. He was a couple of miles an hour quicker in the speed trap. And a disgusted Fran Rueda. I mean, you would be frustrated if you were Fran Rueda, wouldn't you? He had over a 10-second lead before that safety car came out. He'll be thinking, if only they hadn't made contact, those two back markers in the middle sector, if only the safety car hadn't come out, then maybe when he handed over to Marcello Han, he wouldn't have been under pressure, and they might have been able to hang on to the lead.
Yeah, and Niederhauser 2 seconds faster than Han on that lap, so even if they had pitted earlier and had Marcello Han in the car for longer, possibly Niederhauser, even on slightly older rubber by that point, would still have got past. So yeah, I think you can blame the safety car for that one, or the two back markers to be more precise, which is a shame because it was a great drive by the leader at that point. But obviously tomorrow can do it all over again.
Well, exactly, and sometimes if you finish a step further down the podium, you have to take less time penalty in the next race. That might sometimes work out in your favour. I'm still not convinced, though, that the KTM is going to have this all its own way, because Callum McLeod is the second fastest car on the track, and he's capable of lapping within a tenth or so of Niederhauser. He's definitely going to have a chance at attacking Marcello Han for second place before the end of the race, which is still 24 minutes away, as the Joe Osborne and Charlie Eastwood scrap for 8th position makes its way down through turn number 4. So you can see on the left-hand side of your screen the order. It's Niederhauser that leads, Han is second, McLeod third, Henry Chavez is in 4th place, Brendan Iribe is 5th, Vincent Abril is 6th, then Angelo Negro, Joe Osborne, Charlie Eastwood and Jens Liebhauser, with Alexei Nesov, former single-seater star, in 11th, Manuel Lauk is 12th, Christian Klein is 13th, and Nicky Luttweiler 14th.
And I think Callum McLeod's charge might have to die down a bit because he's on his last warning for track limits between turns 9 and 10. Obviously that won't all be his responsibility because obviously he's taken over the car. So across the two drivers in that car, they've racked up the maximum number of track limits offences before a penalty is issued.
Yes, so that will possibly dampen his challenge for race victory, and indeed his previous lap was quite a bit slower than the two cars in front of him. Osborne and Eastwood are spurring each other on here, and they're catching Angelo Negro, who again is an AM driver, so they should be quicker than him, and they are indeed proving quicker. These two need to work together, I think, because they, if they do work together, they've got the potential to gain quite a few more places. They've got a few AM drivers not that far up the road from them. They're catching the AF Corsa Ferrari, the number 48 machine, very quickly as it heads out of turn number 4. The Ferrari currently sits in 7th position at the moment, the 48 car. Their best finish of the year so far is 9th, but of course if these two both get through, which I suspect might happen fairly quickly, they'll be back down into that same 9th position once again. And you can see here really, can't you, Elliot, the difference between a pro and an AM driver. I mean, a couple of laps ago you couldn't even see this Ferrari off in the distance in front of them, and all of a sudden they're right there with him and they should be able to get through quickly.
This may be a tactical game though, because once the AF Course team knew that their second car was going to be under threat, obviously Stefan Ortelli or Vincent Abril's further up the road, just driven over the wing mirror of Stefan Ortelli from earlier. Joe Osborne is now ahead. What I was going to say is hold Osborne Eastwood up, because Eastwood is fighting with Vincent Abril for 3rd place in the pro class. Then that would have helped, because there's around 6 seconds between them, and Eastwood's still fighting. I don't think this is going to end in tears, but I potentially think it will end in a penalty because of how much they're forcing each other off track at the moment. They're
both top drivers, these two, and they're both going to be really loving this battle, I'm sure, but they are certainly entertaining us as they head through turn number 1. Osborne and Eastwood again running wide there. Yeah, you're right, he's taking some liberties now, isn't he? The 44 car there, by the way, Liebhauser, that is for position. He is the leading AM car, and he's coming up now to start overtaking some of the Pro-Am cars. The 44 car run by Get Speed Performance. He's having a good run. Up the inside goes Charlie Eastwood, up the inside of Osborne, but he runs wide, and Joe Osborne saw what was happening there, left the door open on the way into the corner so that he could carry the speed back up the hill, and the McLaren has good traction being mid-engined up out of the tight corner, so he goes back through. This battle, they've changed positions a couple of times, haven't they, since the pit stops, and Charlie Eastwood just cannot break through the defences of the Optimum Motorsport McLaren in front.
I think the car to watch right now is another McLaren. Henrique Chavez has done 1 minute 29s for the last 5 laps. He's now only 6.8 seconds off the leader, and he's actually only 7/10 behind Callum McLeod, who's obviously got to make sure he's not doing any more track limits offences. So we could see a change in position for the final podium place.
Yes, then we've also got this scrap. Vincent Abril has caught Brendan Iribe in the McLaren and is trying to get through for 5th position. There are the two you were mentioning though. Callum McLeod in the Mercedes just, but only just ahead of Enrique Chavez in the McLaren. And then it's side by side here, Ferrari versus McLaren, and Vincent Abril has the inside line. Iribe, an AM driver, Abril a pro, who is getting used to this Ferrari. He's not raced Ferraris previously in international GT racing, but he is acclimatising well to this mid-engined Italian monster as he is monstering the back of the McLaren up the hill. But McLaren's got good straight line speed. Is there a gap on the inside line? Oh, no, he was trying it, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, we've seen the other Ferrari was able to take it down the inside, but couldn't make the move around the outside. So would have thought he would have taken from his teammate and tried it down the inside there. But equally, damage, the side of the car. You wouldn't want that either.
Yes, indeed. Oh, there's a dive being made here up the inside. That's Chavez on McLeod for 3rd place now. And Enrique Chavez leans on the Mercedes, manages to prise the door open, and he's into 3rd place now. So the McLaren goes ahead. The Teo Martin Motorsport car is slowly but surely has picked its way through the field. Having started down in 9th place, they're now on the podium. It was a great opening stint for Miguel Ramos. They had a good pit stop with, despite the handicap that they had to serve, and now they're into a podium place. Now, can they catch Marcello Hahn in the KTM? That's the next question. Let's see what the gap is this time. Hahn just did a 1:30.1, and the McLaren is 4.5 seconds back now.
Well, I think Hahn, obviously his teammate's Enrique Chavez, so if the team has any sense, and we didn't see this happen last year, Teo Martin drivers clashed quite a bit last year, but if Chavez is closing in, I think they should let Chavez through. Or even send Hahn in attack of Niederhauser as much as possible now. See if he can make Niederhauser take more out of his own tyres. So as Chavez comes closer, there's less to respond to once Chavez eventually gets past.
Well, here is the Ferrari-McLaren battle going on behind them again still, as the number 17 car, which is being reprimanded for the reason that we suspected, not entering the pit lane through the correct line. So it was because of pit lane entry for number 17 and 16 and 48 as well. The 17 car is up the inside line this time. Has it got the horsepower though? Down the hill into turn number 4, side by side then into the right-hander. This is for 5th position, and Vincent Abril, I think this time surely will go through. The Ferrari's been struggling on the brakes a bit today, but he had the inside line and got the car stopped nicely. So Vincent Abril moves his way into P5, with a bit of debris on the road there on the run through turn 6. And again, the Ferrari should now be able to pull clear. Back to your point with the Teo Martin cars, the trouble that they've got is that as is often the case in GT racing, especially a Pro-Am lineup, at the end of the day, the AM driver is the team's customer. They are paying the team to be there. And so, yes, it makes more sense for them to let the quicker car or the higher placed car in the championship go. But then if you're the AM driver in the number 16 car, Marcello Hand, you're paying good money to be out there, and you don't want any favouritism in the team either way. So quite often they have to ignore what would actually make sense and just do what's going to keep their customers happy. They are, at the end of the day, running a business.
And that's a new one from the McLaren, not even flashing. He was indicating right as he was going down the pit straight. And we're seeing another replay of the move by the Aston Martin there. Actually, the Ferrari got forced. What, did he go for a double move there almost? That's a very difficult corner to make anything work with regards to overtaking. And the 72 car of Joe Osborne went past as well. Potentially the Ferrari had a the Ferrari had a problem there.
Yeah, I mean, there was the tiniest of gaps, wasn't it, for Joe Osborne? But Joe, he's quite good at this racing business, isn't he, really? He knows how to pull off a good overtake, and Joe Osborne was able to find a gap that was just about McLaren-sized and move through. He's still keeping Charlie Eastwood at bay, and they are continuing to lap quicker than the next car in front of them, which now is the other Optimum Motorsport car, the number 7 of Brendan Iribe. So the gap here, I think, between the Optimum cars is going to disappear, and this could soon become a fight for 6th place. I'm not sure they're going to get much further than that. Vincent Abril will probably have escaped by that point, and so it might be that 6th place is as good as it gets for either of these two cars. And for the TF Sport car in particular, they need those points. They cannot afford to hand away too many more points, especially given the remarkable recovery job that Teo Martin's 59 car has done.
I was going to say, the Negro Ferrari they were battling with earlier has now dropped all the way down to 10th, but he's literally just been passed by Alexei Nezov for 10th place overall. Nezov's now chasing Jens Lieberhauser for the AM class lead. 3.2 seconds between them, 15 minutes to go. He's slightly quicker, so we could see a lead battle there as well. But Patrick Niederhauser is actually lapping pretty much level with Chavez, or faster than Chavez for the last few laps. And with 15 minutes to go, I don't think we're going to see a change. Another last warning for car number 34, which is
Well,
Charlie
that's Eastwood. What they're saying is he's now being given a penalty. He's been given his last warning, and he's continued to run wide. So the red Aston Martin that you're watching now, as it attacks Joe Osborne again up the hill into turn number 3, has been given a 3-second time penalty. Can it make up for that by making the place right round the outside? That might just work. You know, he's got good traction on the outside line. They're wheel to wheel again, and the Aston Martin hasn't got the grunt in a straight line. No, Joe Osborne is fighting back. Fantastic wheel to wheel action this, and they haven't yet made any contact either. It's been a fantastic scrap, and still Eastwood frustratingly can't get through, and Joe Osborne just parks the car on the apex at turn number 5, right, the first time, and manages to hold on to the place. Eastwood has a lunge up the inside. That's not going to work. There's almost contact. There is contact, but Osborne again just refuses stubbornly to give this place away, and why should he? At the end of the day, they're both pro drivers. They're both trying to get the best result possible. The Aston Martin might be a bit quicker at this stage of the race, but Joe Osborne is not for letting him through. Yeah,
an Optimum with the McLaren will actually know where the Aston Martin is going to be quicker, because they did run the Aston here last year. They were the only Aston car on the grid, so they'll know which corners their driver needs to defend in and which ones, you know, can be a little more relaxed in. We've just seen the fastest actual top speed by Charlie Eastwood at the split, and his personal best first sector, so he's definitely upping his pace now he knows he's got a penalty.
Yes, the good news is it shouldn't lose him a position. He's 2.8 seconds already ahead of Jens Liebhauser.
But he was 3 seconds ahead, so it's actually gone down.
They're holding each other up then. That's the replay of the change for third place. Enrique Chavez going past Callum McLeod, and Callum McLeod, again, an AM driver, silver-graded driver really, but we just have pros and AMs in International GTOpen. Just got a glimpse there of the number 7 Optimum Motorsport McLaren that Joe Osborne and Charlie Eastwood are continuing to catch, despite their ever more enthusiastic battling that they're doing. And yeah, they're definitely not going to catch Abril, though. Abril is now 3.2 seconds ahead of Iribe in the McLaren.
And Jens Lieberhauser could actually jump both of these cars, Joe Osborne and Charlie Eastwood, because the second of those has also got their last warning for track limits. So we could have the AM leader making up 2 positions without having to do much work.
Well, you see, this is where Optimum, you would imagine, will be on the radio to Joe Osborne saying, look, you're on your final warning and the bloke behind you's got a 3-second penalty. If it's really going to get to it, just let him go, and then maybe you can just sit behind him. You'll both work better together anyway if you're not racing each other, and there's no real need for Joe to be pushing so hard right now.
But at the same time, it just takes one mistake to go over the curves one more time, and then if he does let him pass and he accidentally gets a penalty anyway, then it's all for nothing.
Precisely. Right, this is always something to make Teo Martin Motorsport team members nervous, because their two cars are together on track fighting over second place. Enrique Chavez has caught Marcello Han pretty quickly, and Marcello, who is the highest placed AM driver in the field, runs a bit wide there through turn 3, and surely this is the chance now for Chavez to get through. He's on the inside line. Both of these cars run out of the same stable. They're identical in performance, therefore, you would imagine. But the 16 car stays in front, or does it, because Chavez is up the inside and does go into second place. So Enrique Chavez into P2. He's been lapping fractionally quicker than the leader of late. There are 12 minutes and a bit left to go, but he's the best part of 7 seconds behind the race leader Patrick Niederhauser, so I'm not sure he's going to have time to get there. But the Teo Martin Motorsport cars do swap positions. They don't swap any paint on this occasion. They keep out of each other's way, and Enrique Chavez is able to get into P2.
Yeah, and with 11 minutes left of this race, we now have 7.2 seconds between our two lead cars. So 11 minutes probably translate to 6 laps, I think, potentially, with 1 minute 30 lap on average. So it's going to take a big effort from Enrique Chavez to close in on Patrick Niederhauser. And we don't actually know if Niederhauser would get a success penalty for race 2 because it's a guest driver. There is Fran Moreda cheering on his teammate Marcello Han. Well, he's sharing the car with Marcello Han, who's now in 3rd. Will he come under pressure from Callum McLeod possibly later in this race?
McLeod's 3 seconds back and was over nearly a second and a half quicker on the previous lap, although of course Han was being overtaken at the time. They are both AM drivers, but I would venture McLeod is the quicker of the two. So yeah, you're quite right. That could become the next battle to watch out for. Look at that. Hardly anybody is running in the position they started in. Callum McLeod is in 4th. Nick Lutweiler is at the back of the field, but he's had rather a day to forget, hasn't he, in the Porsche that is still lapping out there, albeit 3 laps off the lead of the race. So we're heading in towards the final 10 minutes or so then now. Patrick Niederhauser in the KTM Crossbow has the lead by 7 seconds over Enrique Chavez. That is the starting point, as the Teo Martin drivers are having a nice laugh after their stint.
Stefan Ortelli, I think.
It was actually.
Yeah.
That'll be, yes, so that'll be Ortelli and Ramos, won't it, after their slight bit of contact that they had on a couple of occasions in the first stint of the race. Joe Osborne and Charlie Eastwood still going at it here over 7th place. Right, I will run through the order now. Niederhauser leads the way by 6.8 seconds. It's coming down over Enrique Chavez in 2nd. Marcello Han is 3rd. Callum McLeod 4th. 5th, Vincent Abril. 6th for Brendan Uribe. 7th place is Joe Osborne. Charlie Eastwood is 8th. Jens Liebhauser is 9th. And Alexei Nosov is 10th. The class leaders, the top 2 cars overall, are both pro-class cars. Marcello Han in 3rd is the leading Pro-Am car. And Jens Liebhauser has a 2.5 second lead in the AM category over Alexei Nosov. So that's not actually a massive margin there. That could still come right down to the wire, as I suspect will this battle between Osborne and Eastwood. Osborne again kicking up the dirt there, coming out of turn 10.
Yeah, it's getting very, very close here, but still no change position. The cars have got the lights on, and that's because the sun's kind of setting towards our west now, and there's very long shadows along the circuit, especially at turn 3 as well. Now, you can actually have cars that get spun round at turn 3, but because it's a blind apex over the crest, you can't see them. So you get to the corner and suddenly have to gear wide to avoid them. So that's potentially a safety thing, is why you do have your lights on, because you obviously see them reflecting or something if there is a car there, what with the drivers being sat so low in their cars.
Yes, because even the race leader, who has no one to flash his lights or have his headlights on to try and distract in front, Patrick Niederhauser still has them on and is still leading the way, but the gap's down by half a second already on this lap. Enrique Chavez is going to throw everything he has at this. Remember, the 59 car leads the championship but hasn't actually won a race yet, so it looks as though they might be the bridesmaids again. And this is kind of the problem with this, well, not the problem with the handicap system, but this is one of the difficulties of the handicap system. Even if you just keep finishing 2nd or 3rd, you're still racking up time for the handicap. So really, if you're going to have a time penalty, at least make it for a race win, because if you're consistently finishing 2nd and 3rd, you're not winning races, but you're still racking up time in the pit stops, and that's very much what's happened to this car this year, the number 59 car. Enrique Chavez Enrique Chavez and Miguel Ramos. And let's see, is the gap coming down in all 6.1, so it came down by about 3/10 that time. And it stays pretty stable. In fact, it stays exactly the same as they go into the end of Sector 1. Getting away from his teammate though, isn't he? So Chavez has good speed here at this late part of the race. Less than 8 minutes to go now. So, Colin McLeod not catching them in 4th. Vincent Dabril is catching McLaren, but he's 9 seconds back. The other place that is likely to change then is 6th place, the 2 Optimum cars and Charlie Eastwood's TF Sport Aston Martin that is set to take a bit of a hit here in the championship. You get 15 points for winning a race. And of course, the KTM that is leading the race is not going to score those points, so the 15 points instead will go to Chavez in 2nd. So in a way, he's done the job that he needs to. He's already on course for a next race victory, even if he finishes 2nd on the road. Joe Osborne is busy here. He's attacking his teammate. He's defending again from Charlie Eastwood in the Aston Martin. This is a fantastic battle going on between these three. And Joe Osborne, again, not having life made easy for him by his teammate, because Brendan is a paying customer to Optimum Motorsport. He's not going to move over and let Joe Osborne through. And you know what? They'll both be relishing this, I think. Joe Osborne will be relishing the opportunity to have a good battle with one of the AM drivers in the team, who Joe helps through driver training as well, and as does Ollie Milroy, both of them McLaren factory drivers. That's their day job, essentially, is to test the cars and also help out with the customers that have bought their cars. And there's no doubt that Brendan is going to be relishing the chance to go up against one of the top McLaren Pro drivers as well. So this is a fascinating battle.
However, what we did see at Paul Ricard was this kind of battle didn't end very satisfyingly. The two McLarens span each other around. They're getting very loose on the curbs now. That's giving the Aston Martin the advantage. Takes a bit of grass going along the straight uphill to turn 3. I think he could go down the inside because the McLaren's covering off the line in front. So clearly the McLaren behind can't take it, and the Aston Martin has made the move.
Yeah, this time I don't think he'll run wide on the exit. No, he doesn't. So Joe Osborne will be kicking himself there. The tiniest mistake, and he's been under such immense pressure from Eastwood all through this stint. And that was really the first time that Joe's made a mistake. Just got a bit sideways coming out of turn 1, and the loss of momentum allowed Eastwood through. The frustration for Eastwood, though, is that he's finally got through and he can't go anywhere. There's another Optimum Motorsport McLaren now blocking the way. And now, of course, Brendan in the number 7 car is going to be even more determined to hold on to this place, because it's no longer his teammate behind him. He could do his teammate a real favour here by holding the Aston Martin up and letting Joe Osborne have a go at getting back through. Yeah,
and of course, one of these cars does have a penalty. So it's, you know, the track... Oh, actually, another car has a penalty now. Vincent Abril, who's currently in 5th place, so he's not going to lose a position from this, is on his own up front, as is Patrick Niederhauser, who's got 5.4 second advantage with 5 minutes 18 to go. Here's a replay of the move by Aston Martin, going very heavy on the brakes, and very clean move in the end.
Yeah, the mistake was made at the previous corner, and Charlie Eastwood, an experienced driver, does not need a second invitation. Came up through the Porsche scholarship ranks in the UK, did Charlie. Irish driver is now doing his best to try and get into the top 6 here. These would be valuable points for the TF squad, and he is alongside now, but on the outside line up towards turn number 3. This is where he passed Osborne a lap ago, but that time he had the luxury of the inside line. He's late on the brakes though. If he stops the car, he should make it work. He runs a bit wide, gets good traction from the wide line coming off the corner though, and he makes it stick. Nicely done.
I would be so frustrated if I was Joe Osborne right now, because he just let the Aston Martin through, but he didn't let a fellow McLaren through. As we were seeing with the McLarens as well, and you see it indicating as well, I'm wondering if this is a driver thing, or it's potentially an automatic thing, that if you brake very hard and change direction, it must think you're indicating for like a junction or something, and it uses the indicator, because I can't think of any other reason why you'd use it.
Charlie Eastwood, 5-second penalty now, so things are going from bad to worse. He's finally got through here, but he's now going to have a 5-second penalty. That would drop him behind the two McLarens, who themselves are now going to swap places. Are they? No, they almost make contact, actually. I thought that Brendan Uribe was moving out of the way there. I think Joe Osborne thought he was as well, but the door was slammed in his face, and yeah, this is now getting to the point where it's holding them both up. They're being caught by Jens Liebhauser, the leading AM driver, and at this rate, it is not beyond the realms of possibility that Eastwood could pull a 5-second gap on them in the remaining 3.5 minutes.
And I think we're just about to see, well, not on camera, but Christian Klein overtake Angelona Grove for 12th overall and 5th in the Pro-Am class, which are the next two cars in this class behind these two McLaren drivers.
Yeah, good point. That's worth points within the Pro-Am Championship, of course. So this 5-second track limits penalty for Charlie Eastwood means that if he can get 5.001 seconds ahead of these two McLarens, he will retain 6th place. If he can't, though, he's going to drop back behind them on corrected times anyway, and he might even fall back behind this car, because, as we've said, Jens Liebhauser is doing an excellent job here as the leading AM driver. in closing in on two very experienced pros in front of him. Admittedly, they've been held up a bit by the number 7 McLaren, which runs a bit deep there into turn number 4. Joe Osborne, well, I said earlier on he would have been relishing this battle that he's having with his teammate. Maybe now he's not enjoying it quite so much, because he will be rather frustrated that, as you said, the Aston Martin got through on the first attempt as well. And Osborne again is on the inside here into the left-hander, and this time he will force the issue and go through. But that took a lot longer to get past his teammate than it took for Charlie Eastwood to do it.
Yeah, I'll be very frustrated. And the fact is that the 6th place car, number 34, does a 5-second penalty. Jens Leverhauser is only 1 second off 6th place in the leading AM-class car, which is an incredible performance even on a circuit as short as this. Only got 2 minutes left, so probably 2 laps. Patrick Niederhauser still a 5.3 second lead. I think this might be the biggest ever win for KTM with a non-bike. Because they did British GT in 2008 to 2011.
Yep.
GT4, the first generation. Didn't Phil King win the title?
Yes, you might be right, yeah.
That was ages ago. Yeah, and then it returned last year with the new generation GT4 car. They've now homologated the GT3 version, so this will be a class-up victory anyway. And obviously this is its home circuit, KTM boards all over the place. And as well as that, I think the only other time KTM has won here was a few weeks ago in MotoGP, if I'm correct. Styrian Motorcycle Grand Prix, Miguel Oliveira, KTM Tech 3. KTM is having the time of its life at the Red Bull Ring over the last month. It's time to be KTM.
Isn't it just? Yeah, and you're quite right. The Red Bull KTM links are pretty strong, aren't they? This is essentially their home track. There was the move for Joe Osborne on the inside of his teammate. Nicely done. And that means that Charlie Eastwood is probably going to fall back behind Osborne on corrected times. There's a replay again from on board of how he did it. The gap between Eastwood and you know what I'm trying to say, Eastwood and Osborne is 2.8 seconds as we go on to the final lap. And remember, Eastwood has that 5-second penalty. Osborne, though, is on his final warning, so he'll have to be quite careful on the final lap of the race.
Yeah, Niederhauser actually dropped half a second in that first sector as Henrique Chavez. Gap went from 4.9 to 4.3. I don't think final laps, nothing's going to change, surely. It could be last lap drama.
Well, it's not unheard of, let's face it, in International GTOpen. We've had a bit of that in the past, but I suspect this is more Patrick Niederhauser just stroking it home, so to speak. Doesn't need to take any big risks. He's got a nice lead over the McLarens in 2nd and 3rd. And it looks as though it is going to be a historic first victory for the GT3 homologated KTM Crossbow, which heads up the hill. It started 3rd on the grid, and we were waxing lyrical after qualifying about just how impressive a performance that was. They got 2nd at the start of the race. That was impressive, but then they were under a bit of pressure before the pit stops. But after the pit stops, they were in the right position, and they are going to take victory in round number 5 of the International GTOpen Championship. A victory at the Red Bull Ring for KTM. There's something that just sounds right about that. McLaren are 2nd. The championship leading Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren of Henrique Chavez and Miguel Ramos is 2nd place, and the 3rd place Marcello Hankar almost in the pit wall as it celebrates 3rd position and the victory in the Pro-Am class. 4th goes to Ram Racing. 5th place will go to Vincent Abril in the number 17 AF Corsa Ferrari, and that's 3rd in the Pro class. Charlie Eastwood will come home 6th, but I think Joe Osborne is still just about within 5 seconds. Yes, he is, and Osborne on corrected tyres will go through. And in fact, Eastwood has lost quite a bit there, hasn't he? Because he's fallen right the way down to 10th place. So on corrected times, Osborne is 6th, Iribe is 7th, Liebhauser 8th, and then I hadn't spotted that Alexei Nesov had also got himself into the 5-second window, so he moves ahead of Eastwood, and he drops down into 10th position. Manuel Lauk will come home 11th for the SBS Automotive Performance team. 12th place for Christian Klein in the 88 Mercedes. Angelo Negro in the 2nd AF Corsa car is down in 13th, and Nicky Luttweiler now flashes across the start-finish line to finish 14th in the Porsche.
And while a lot of these teams obviously buy cars from a manufacturer and they do have technical support, the Reiter engineering team that runs this KTM actually self-developed the car. Yes,
they did, but they know what they're doing, right, don't they? They're a very experienced GT team with Lamborghinis in particular. Reiter Engineering then win in the KTM Crossbow. Niederhauser and Rosina with the victory by 3.5 seconds in the end over Teo Martin, who are second and third, and extend their championship lead with the 59 car. Sam Dehan and Callum McLeod are fourth for Ram Racing on their first appearance of the year, with Louis Pret and Vincent Abril for AF Corsa rounding out the top 5. Then it was Nick Moss and Joe Osborne for Optima Motorsport ahead of their teammate, the number 7 car of Uribe and Milroy. And then the AM victory went the way of the number 44 car of Jens Liebhauser that he shared with Florian Stoltz. Second place in the class for Alexei Nosov, and third for Manuel Lauk. Drivers' Championship, 11 points the cushion now, but it is the 17 Ferrari that moves into second place. Louis Pret and Vincent Abril's 5th position is enough to put them ahead of Sally Yolok and Charlie Eastwood's TF Sport Aston Martin. Marcello Han is 4th, but the top 3 teams still only covered by 15 points. Okay, not as tight as it was coming into the weekend, but I think that's going to keep on ebbing and flowing with each round, isn't it? I really don't think any one team is going to be able to steal a march in the championship this year.
Yeah, and what we do need to know is if the McLaren is awarded, because the McLaren was awarded full points for race victory because this is a gas car, the KTM, you can see how cramped it is in there. But whether the KTM does actually get a pit stop penalty for race 2, or if it's only applying to the championship registered drivers, such as McLaren, as we can see the Blue Motorsport team celebrating. I'm sure the Dutch, I'm sure the Austrians love a bit of Eurodance. We can play I'm Blue later.
Please don't. Yes, I think the KTM, to answer your question, to talk about racing again if we can, it will get a penalty, a handicap in the second race. The sheet I've got here seems to indicate there's a space for a success penalty to be written in, so I think that although it's not scoring points, it still has to be eligible for all of the other sporting regulations within the championship. So that will add, I think it's 15 seconds extra onto their pit stop, but if you added 15 seconds onto their race time today, they'd still have been on the podium. So that shows the kind of pace that car has. And Patrick Niederhauser it was who brought the car home. Let's have a word with him now. So victory for the KTM Crossbow then of Patrick Niederhauser. Let's have a word with him now in the pit lane.
What a surprise here at Red Bull Ring with the victory of the KTM on its first appearance in the GTOpen, and 2 very happy men here with us. Stefan Rosina, who did the first stint, and Patrick Niederhauser, who did the second. Let's start with Stefan. Stefan, you were thinking of that?
No, I mean, we were discussing, we thought we would be competitive, but I think we would not think of winning by this margin, but we have to say opponents were struggling. So I think it was really, really good competition. All cars were equal and we enjoyed that thoroughly. It was really nice.
And the car, of course, worked beautiful, Patrick. What can you say about this machine?
Yeah, it was just a beauty to drive, I mean, the McLaren came right in front of me out of the pit box, so I had a little fight with him, but after that it was just pushing, and the car felt really amazing, especially, in that young age of the concept car, but it's just a fantastic car to drive, and really enjoyed it.
Well done, guys. Time to enjoy in the home of KTM, of course. Well done.
Yeah, really fitting victory that for the KTM car and the Reiter Engineering team. Let's take a look then at some of the highlights of round number 5 of the International GTOpen that started with the number 16 Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren of Fran Rueda on the pole position. He turned into turn number 1 whilst it was side by side behind, and it was Stefan Rosina in the KTM that got himself ahead of Louis Pret in the Ferrari to take second place out of turn number 1. the battle early on was between Stefan Ortelli and Miguel Ramos, with the latter trying desperately to find the way past the Ferrari. They made contact on more than one occasion, but the two were laughing about it in the pit lane afterwards. No hard feelings, clearly. It was a slightly troubling first part of the race for the TF Sport Aston Martin of Sally Yolland, that just couldn't make the same sort of progress that their championship rivals were in the early stages of the race. And then the race was rather turned on its head by this contact, with Nicky Lutweiler getting elbowed into the gravel trap by Patrick Krapinski's Mercedes. The safety car came out not long before the pit lane window opened, and several cars had to serve handicap penalties. Once the pit stops were done, the KTM came out right behind the 16 McLaren and was pretty quickly able to find its way through, whilst it was the other Teo Martin McLaren that was making all of the progress. The 59 car started down in 9th place, but Enrique Chavez was able to work his way, first of all past Callum McLeod, then past his teammate Marcello Hahn to finish in 3rd. It was a historic victory though for the KTM Crossbow GTX concept, and Patrick Niederhauser and Stefan Racina were victorious at the Red Bull Ring in race number 1 of the weekend, with Enrique Chavez in the 59 car coming home second, and Marcello Hahn making it 2 Teo Martin Motorsport McLarens on the podium. Brilliant racing all round, and the group of drivers assembled now to head out onto the podium, and they are, some of them, a little more ready to get out onto the podium than others. And third step of the podium it is for the number 16 car, Marcello Hahn and Fran Rueda. And Teo Martin, I think they'll be happy with that, won't they, Elliot? 2 cars on the podium, and they're the top 2 highest scoring cars in the race as well. Oh, dearie me. That's, you know, they don't put a foot wrong on the track, but as soon as you get them out of the car, podiums can be dangerous places, apparently. That was a slight trip, the only real mistake made by the 59 squad of Miguel Ramos and Enrique Chavez today. The winners, though, Niederhauser and Stefan Racina.
Congratulations to our...
Huge congratulations then to our podium finishers, and it's the Reiter Engineering KTM that is on the top step of the podium. The drivers are, at least. Stefan Racina and Patrick Niederhauser drove a faultless race. 3rd on the grid, moved into 2nd at the start, and then chased down the race leaders after the pit stops, and were reasonably quickly able to get themselves into 1st position. They were quick on the track, they're quick getting the cork out of the champagne as well, as the champagne shower begins here at the Red Bull Ring, and the Teo Martin squad eventually are able to join in with the champagne shower as well. But great opportunity for the teams to celebrate after a fantastic 5th round of the International GTOpen here at the Red Bull Ring. Join us again tomorrow for more of the same. We promise it's going to be another great race. We'll see you again tomorrow afternoon.
So fine, how was yours?
Yeah, all right. Bit of a battle beast here, we got past him quicker, and he was just doing track limits so much. He doesn't get a penalty.
He got a penalty, did he?
And then he finally got a penalty. So we did finish in front of him.
Yeah. I got to my last warning just trying to catch up. Maybe Adam tried to attack and was put away from me. Yeah. I was like, but there you go.
What do you think of the Michelin's?
Yeah, it's really good.
Nice compared to Freddie, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just in terms of not being so watery.
Yeah, mate, so much more stability under brake.
I don't think they're any quicker anymore, though. I think
In the 2nd place of the Prime category, Sendan Callum McLeod.
There with his teammate car, of course. So Joe Osborne in the 72 car brought the car home. It was Nick Moss who did the first stint. Second place in Pro-Am on their first appearance in the championship is Ram Racing, and it is Callum McLeod and Sam DeHaan who finished second. And of course, a second visit to the podium already this afternoon for the drivers of the number 16 Teo Martin Motorsport McLaren. Marcello Hahn and Fran Rueda were third overall and victorious in the Pro-Am category. Trophies held aloft then for the 6 drivers. The Pro-Am battles always pretty intense as the cars tend to ebb and flow a bit depending on who's in the car at any given moment. But it was the Teo Martin Motorsport car that came out on top, and the champagne is sprayed. Oh dear, Moss has lost his champagne bottle, I think, there. He's run after it. There's been a few little slip-ups on the podium today, haven't there? He's just going to save that now and have that with his dinner later on, I think. So then we wait for the AM podium, and we welcome our third-placed AM finishers momentarily, who will be the drivers of the number 40 car. There's just a few more photos being taken of our Pro-Am winners, Marcello Hahn and Fran Rueda, who started on pole position, of course, came home in third place at the end of the race. And the Pro-Am teams now waiting to go out there as well, as the sun sets on a fantastic day of racing here at the Red Bull Ring. With a thoroughly entertaining opening GTOpen race of the weekend. Right, third place then in the AM category goes the way of the number 40 SPS Automotive Performance Mercedes of Christian Hook and Manuel Laup. They are third position in AM. Second place went the way of the number 13 AKM Motorsport Mercedes, Alexei Nasov and Alexander Moisev. They make their way with handshakes and fist bumps onto the second step of the podium, but the winner in the AM category here at the Red Bull Ring was the Get Speed Performance squad, another Mercedes of Florian Scholz and Jens Liebhaus. There are 3 Mercedes in the AM category, and they're all on the podium. And the highest placed of those was the 44 car in 8th position overall. In fact, the 13 was only 1.7 seconds further back. So good to see the AM drivers, both AM teams, all doing pretty well overall. That then rounds out all of the action here from the Red Bull Ring. We hope to have you back with us again tomorrow for the second race. There'll be another qualifying session in the morning, a 60-minute race in the afternoon that should be every bit as entertaining as today's 5th round of the championship was. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thinking of that? You were thinking of that? You were thinking of that?